Our president has approved the implementation of 35 and 23% salary increase for staff of all federal tertiary institutions in the country. You know, Sam, last week we were talking about the issue of human capital development, and you emphasized on the need to, focus on the human aspect of every organization. For every organization, the human aspect is quite important. Now the president is coming up with this approval. What do you think will be the impact on the staff of these federal institutions?
I think first we have to thank the president for taking this initiative. In the last 8 years, there's been struggle between the Academic Staff Union of universities in respect of their salaries, and this increment will spur them and ginger them to work. So I think this is a president that has a listening ear to the aspirations of the Academic Staff Union. I think this is a welcome development. Why the proposal that was made for the increment represented about 200 and something %, but then, as they say in the local parlance, I think this is just a new beginning, and I'm sure that there will be an improvement on this. That again, we challenge them to work, and apparently some of the agitations will die down naturally. And I think this is a good initiative, and I'm sure that they will be celebrating this as well.
What a good way for the president to start. If there's always this saying that have bread is better than none.
Yes,
if you're asking for more percentage and now you have 35, that's a good way to start. And one interesting thing is you can't rule away, good motivation is tied to good allowances and all that. Now that the salary of this staff has been increased, we are hoping that it will motivate them, it will encourage them to give the best of service, and they will be able to do whatever is required. You must understand that for us to have good education, it requires good funding as well.
Yes.
And that's why the president has taken the bull by the horn to ensure that he takes the first thing, which is to motivate the federal staff. And I'm hoping this can be extended to the state universities and even to the civil service at large.
Well, it's for a salary increase for staff of all federal tertiary institutions in the country. So it then means that the universities would benefit from this. And I think this will go a long way in reducing, if ever it occurs, the chances of us having ASU strike and students being at home for a long time. But on the flip side, there are consequences to every action. Let's look at the market response. The market woman doesn't distinguish between a lecturer or someone in the academia and the other person who's coming to buy something from her. So I think we should also expect a market response. The market women want to have a share of the 25 and 35% salary increase. So the next time you send someone to the market, Femi, I don't know who that would be, expect that they come
that is if I won't go to the market.
They come giving you a feedback in that regard.
It's always the natural effect where you hear salary increase and then what follows, increase in prices of goods and services, which is, the forces of demand and supply. And then when that play out, because like you said, an average market woman there doesn't understand that, oh, these are for federal institutions, these are for state institutions. All shares heard this, okay, there's an increase in salary. Once this is approved, the next thing the woman is, to increase the price of certain goods, and then the services that follow, you understand, the prices are increased. And what that means is, even with the increase that you have, you are still spending more in order to enjoy the goods and services. Sam, I want you to talk to us. What significantly do you expect the president to do? This age-long controversy between ASU and the federal government, is setting the pace now by increasing by approval of the increase in salary. Do you expect more respite to come to, ASU as a union, the issue of misunderstanding about agreement? Maybe, hopefully, he's going to take that route.
I think so. If he can make an input in terms of adjusting their salary, I'm sure for industrial climate and industrial harmony, I'm sure that all the other issues between ASU, particularly in terms of funding for the university, I'm sure the president is going to look into that. He's a man that has an uncommon love for education, particularly from the Awolowo philosophy, which is being shared in the western part of the country. I'm sure that will come through quickly with the president. I have no doubt in my mind that the funding, which is a new budget that will be coming on stream, there will be an increment in the funding for education. This is just a tip in the iceberg, and I'm sure that the industrial relation or labor federal government relation, particularly from ASU, will improve tremendously.
Now, the president is still in the news. Like Blessing said, he's a newsmaker. Now, the next story talks about him, approving, talking about the approval of 535.6 billion loan from the World Bank. Now, the question is, like I always say, it is not a bad thing to obtain loan or to borrow money. But what is more important is you have an understanding of what you want to do with the money. We've always had issues of people borrowing money and eventually they're being diverted, they're not being used for the purpose intended. The issue of borrowing is an economic concept. In fact, it's a universal, practice where even the big countries, they borrow money. But interestingly, our president has highlighted what this money will be used for is to provide additional funding for the ongoing Adolescent Girls Initiative for Learning and Empowerment projects. And the project will expand from the current 7 states to additional 11 states, benefiting out of school girls, married girls, and girls with disabilities. Sam, what do you see about this?
This is great because one of the alarming scenario over the last 15 years or thereabout is over 20 million out of school children. This initiative and this money will go a long way in empowering particularly the girl child in a way that will push the level of school enrollment, and this again will be sustainable over a period of time. And I do know that the president is coming from a business background before coming into politics, so he knows the dynamics of how you spend resource and the benefits and the outcome that will come out of that. So this is a good one, and this money is specifically tied to specific project, and I'm sure the timelines and the deliverables will be achieved within a short possible time, and the impact on the citizen will be far-reaching.
Yeah, so train a girl, you train a community. So it's in that line that the president is working. So not just empowering adolescent girls, but even married girls. And I like the fact that he put it that way, married girls, people who maybe because of religion or tradition got married when they should probably have been in school or getting empowered with one skill or the other, so that they can also be contributors in their family setting. Because when it's just one party supporting the finances of the home, the pressure is so much on the man, and if the man doesn't even have enough income, then it means that there's not enough resource to provide for the need of the house. But when you have both of them providing, then it's better. They can afford more of their basic needs. So it's a welcome development, and it's not just for the students. The teachers, administrators, and families will also benefit from this. So this really is going to families, and it will address a lot of social issues where there is learning provided, where there is empowerment provided, because many social issues are a byproduct of not enough learning and not enough empowerment. So it's good that the president is not just thinking in this direction, but taking steps to actually see this come through.
I like the fact that this time around we have target. This loan is targeted towards specific needs and towards specific set of people. So it makes it more robust when you have that kind of arrangement, not that the loan is being approved and then you don't even have an idea of what to do with it. And like Sam said, we have a president who understands figures.
It's about being strategic and being clear with your vision.
Yeah, and we hope that the money will be used for the purpose intended. Now, let's take a dovetail to education, which the West African Examination Council is set to introduce computer-based tests for its examination. We talked about the impact of technology, the need to upgrade from the conventional kind of education or conducting tests. And now WAEC is taking that initiative to introduce technology. Sam, what do you think will be the impact of this?
Technology is the driver and is the future of the world. So we're talking about artificial intelligence, we're talking about machine learning and all that. So if WAEC is taking that initiative to drive the examination processes through technology, that's a work on development, and I think it's key. That will help to scale the learning process, particularly for those who are doing exam from secondary school and going into tertiary institution. So there's no option for WAEC rather than to move in the direction of technology. I think it's welcoming, and I think that will enhance the learning capacity and the speed at which the examinations are released. Because when you do computer-based tests, the results are always there immediately, and that will reduce some of the issues that has to do with examination malpractices and some other things that WAEC has been accused of in the past.
I remember when I had to sit for my WAEC, that was years back. Don't ask me the year. I'm not that old. But you know, we never had the privilege of having opportunity to, to use a computer. In fact, there was none. And I'm happy this is coming now because it's going to be of help, Then we were doing the conventional thing, the manually driven exam, where everything has to be manually done. You have to sit down and write for hours and all that. But with computer-based, it makes it efficient. Technology brings efficiency. It makes it faster. It makes it easier. And I'm happy that the new generation of students who are going to sit for that exam will enjoy what we didn't enjoy our own time.
It's not just going to be enjoyment, because there is a challenge to this, which WAEC has noted, the gap in technology development. Some students may have an issue or a challenge having to use the CBT, and that they actually recognize with the part of the essay papers, having to type and all of that. And they also noted that because of electricity not being available in every part of the country at same level, there are some areas where you can have maybe like 18 hours of power supply. In some areas it is different. And so because of these challenges, they made the alternative where these are not available, students can use the traditional way. But I think that part of the essay is still being considered. So it's just going to be like for the objective, where they can just click options and they go on with the exam. Yes, I like it. Exposes them. And it also will reduce cost for me, for WAEC. Imagine the cost of printing all the papers and you have to distribute. So, and the issue of malpractice, sometimes we hear of questions being leaked even before the examination date. So that will curb it too. And it's going to be a good one if we can do this for all our examinations, all central examinations, where people can take the examinations conveniently wherever they are. I think it's something that the education sector should pursue.
All right, still on education, the National Board for Technical Education, NBTE, has called for a compulsory 50% inclusion of skill acquisition in the curriculum for secondary school students. The emphasis now is skill acquisition. Like in the past, the emphasis, you have to read your book, you have to ensure that you have a good grade, and then you have a good job. But now we're in the age of ICT, the age of information technology, the age of skill acquisition. Now the National Board for Technical Education is making it compulsory, 50% inclusion in skill acquisition. What's the reaction to this, sir?
That's again a work on development, looking at the dynamics of changes in the global environment. There's a need to constantly review the curriculum. So what the National Board for Technical Education is saying is that for every curriculum, whether you're in the grammar school, you need to have an option. 50% of the curriculum should take cognizance of technical education. This will provide a balanced development. So if the other element of education, if you can't deploy that after graduating, maybe your technical skill competence will be able to provide some form of employment for you. I think this is good for national development.
Yes, it's good because that's one of the reasons polytechnics were set up. So if those who do technical courses in the polytechnic come out and they still have just theoretical knowledge, what is the essence? So that they should have the practical knowledge of a particular skill or any skill before they leave school. It's good. But I think they can also make it something that is well structured. It's a polytechnic. Rather than they having practical knowledge of a particular skill before they graduate, why don't we just structure it? So if you're studying, for instance, mechanical engineering, of course you know practically what it means to be a mechanical engineer. If you're studying architecture, for instance, you know practically what that means. Instead of it being like maybe just one course at the end or something you need to do in order to graduate. I think that way people will really have a grasp on that skill.
All right, let's go to Borno State. This time around, the news is not about Boko Haram, but it's about petrol.
Good to know.
Which is good news. Now, the news is a philanthropist have partnered with filling stations in Borno State to sell petrol at a reduced price of 430 naira. That's remarkable, you know. Like I always say, we don't expect government to do everything. This is just someone or a group of people who feel the need to, you know, help the plight of Nigerians or people living in Borno, where they don't have to spend more in getting, you know, how sensitive petrol is, you know, is an essential, a daily essential. For you as a person to survive in a country like Nigeria, you need to have access to petrol, not just to power your businesses, but to even power your operations, even your homes. There are certain reasons why this product is necessary. Now, this young people or this group of persons have taken the initiative to even, you know, help the plight of people in Borno State by subsidizing. Now, they are taking the position of the federal government. If the federal government has removed subsidy, now they are putting subsidy back and in order to be able to help the plight of people living in Borno State. Sam, what's your reaction to this?
We thank them for the philanthropic gesture, and I think that will help people from Borno State. How sustainable, that may be the question, but we thank them for bringing that initiative and taking some naira and kobo off the fuel pump will go a long way to improve the socioeconomic life of people that come from that state. Maybe people from the peripheral state, we don't know the logistics of how that will be distributed. I'm sure that people within the contiguous state want to go to Borno to get part of those gestures. Anyway, that's just on the soft note. But particularly interesting for that people are thinking about citizens and how they can help to reduce the impact on the negative impact on the removal of fuel subsidy in some bread. That's good.
All right, but what we're saying, there are different challenges that hinder Nigeria from having a census after the last one that was conducted in 2006. We've talked about funding, we've talked about logistics, looking now at political interference and ethnic sentiment, which has been a very key challenge to census. Why do we keep having that? And how can that be erased? Political interference and ethnic sentiment, starting with political interference.
All right, thank you very much. Census has become a major challenge in Nigeria, even pre-independence, post-independence, up to, I think the most reliable census was the one conducted in 1991. That was acceptable by a majority of Nigeria. Even in 1973, that was very contentious. Even the 2006 figure was equally contentious. The reasons are obvious. It also highlighted to some of those core challenges. When you talk about issue of representation, revenue allocation, these are core issues that have gone into the political interference in census data collation. But the point is, from the pre-independence and post-independence area, there's been a mutual suspicion among the various ethnic groups in Nigeria. To what extent is this data that is being collected, are they really the true data of Nigerians? do one ethnic group population greater than the other ones. These are the core reasons why there are political interference. In a country where you have over 250 ethnic group with over 500 language, the challenge is I think it's essentially about the mutual suspicion among the various ethnic nationality that make up Nigeria. But the challenge is that you must have census to determine beyond representation, beyond the funding. And Dausa earlier spoke about the importance in terms of driving private sector businesses. Even for public policy enunciation, you need evidence-based data. For you to do a health policy, education policy, you need data. So this interference must be reduced by public education to show that this data will help to provide adequate facilities for the various ethnic nationalities. So that's mutual suspicion, what happened between the North, the West, and the East in 1963, even up to 1973. I think the one that was conducted in 1991 by Babangida was the most credible one. Incidentally, I participated in that one as a youth service corps member, as an enumerator in Kwara State. So other challenges, even when you do the enumeration, religion is even a major challenge, even when you want to enumerate people. People just count certain people in their household. You can't even see them physically. So what is key, politics is critical, is a dominant issue in Nigeria, but to what extent can we reduce this interference? I think we need to have a political will to drive the process of another census beyond the logistic issues and funding.
Now, according to United Nations, census is supposed to take place between, let's say, within 10 years. But Nigeria, we've not had one in recent times. What will be the impact of this on national planning?
It has negative impact on national planning because the assumption that we have is that we are 200 and something, some fraction, 200 and something million people. But if you look at the population dynamics in terms of new birth and the high ratio in terms of socioeconomic opportunity to people, more children have been born, and for planning purposes, we don't even know the actual population. So the challenge is that for those in public policy, it's very difficult to plan when you don't have evidence-based data. There are data, but it must be evidence-based data, and census is one of those evidence-based data that we need for planning. So it's a challenge for national planning. Therefore, it's important for this new regime to find a way to get appropriate funding so that we get counted again for national planning purposes. So it's important that we need to count ourselves in spite of political interference, ethnic sentiment, logistic issues, and funding. We need to know the actual population. If we look at the dynamics projected by the United Nations by 2030, we're likely to be XY population. So if we don't know the actual data, they will not be able to plan from a strategic point of view for the next 7 years or thereabout.
Talking about strategy, seeing how strategic census is and how different interest group, different ethnic group want to use it to their advantage. How then can we rule out the interference of ethnic sentiment? It will always be there, but how do we ensure a credible census that is not colored by ethnic sentiment or any form of political interference?
Thank you for technology, and technology is an enabler with improvement in technology. I think the data that will be collected in the next census will be very authentic because the other data collection instruments that are technologically driven, which will be able to enhance the credibility, the reliability, and the viability of the data collated from the census. So the sentiment will always be there. People will try to manipulate the figures, even double counting. And I think technology has a way to eliminate some of those counting that will come through political manipulation. So therefore, machine tools, technology, we help to improve on the credibility of the census figure there too.
What do you think can be done to solve this problem? Like you said, he's been there even pre-independence, post-independence. What can be done, you know, to ensure that this ethnic sentiment is not being brought to an important exercise like census?
I think public education is very key. Politicians must educate their constituents on the importance of census, and that census beyond representation and revenue allocation is equally critical for planning social amenities for various communities. That if you are properly counted, then we know the number of hospitals, health centers, the number of children that are born in a particular community, so that government can plan adequately to cater for those people. So those are the kind of education that we must, the National Population Commission, on the other hand, must equally enforce this education through their various offices in the local government by deploying town criers that tell people about the importance of population beyond the ethnic connotation that drive those interference.
Okay, let's look at some misconceptions towards census. Just like we have voter apathy, we could also have an apathy towards citizens participating in census. Some persons believe that regardless whether they come out to vote or not, it's the result that has been concocted in some quarters that will be presented. Same way some people think that whether or not they present themselves to be counted, it's the result that has actually been formulated in some quarters that will be presented. Acceptance of a census result. What should be the approach before census and after census?
I think generally it's education, and public enlightenment. When people know that when they are counted, even in spite of their misgiving that this can be manipulated, and that this data that is collected is for their personal interest in terms of social service delivery to the various community, I think they're able to buy into those processes. But what is key, in my view, is that the National Population Commission must constantly engage with the communities pre-census, during and after the counting. And I'm sure if data, as they are collating those data, there are information that can show that these are the actual people counted in those communities, then their confidence level will be improved over a period of time. As people are being counted, the data are shown almost immediately. So that will not be subject to manipulation. I think that's, in my view, we have to douse tension in terms of manipulation of figures.
Let's look at the structure of National Population Commission as we speak. There's this saying that he who plays the pipe dictates the tune. So this bringing the sentiment that maybe National Population Commission needs to enjoy a sort of independence or autonomy in order to avoid this issue of political interference. What's your take on that?
If you see it from the Independent National Commission that enjoys some independence, there has always been issue with even elections. I think what is important is that the public need to change its mindset about certain public service delivery, in the sense that even though where there's a mutual suspicion, like I mentioned earlier, these data are important, whether it's independent, whether it's the way it's currently considered, whether it's reform. Once that level of mutual suspicion is there, the composition and the structure may not necessarily matter. But what is key, in my view, is the level of education across various local government, state, communities, and the federal level. And for reliability of the data, I think once those data are collected based on artificial intelligence and technology, those results should be published almost immediately as they are counted in the community. That will, over time, reduce that mutual suspicion. Whatever the structure is, I think what is key is to drive the level of education that mutual suspicion can be reduced.
So when census is done, it means we'll have new information of how much, the number of people we have in a particular area, the relevant information about them will be provided. So this will also provide political advantage for some areas. Now, whether that is accepted by some areas or not, but it then means that with the new information, it will provide some form of political advantage for some areas. Now, how would that impact politics at the end of the day? And how will it impact subsequent elections?
No, representation in terms of population will continue to be a political issue because so what is key in this regard is that representation, which is always a major political issue, will continue to be there. But then representation continually is based on the population. Like Kano, for example, has more local government, so they have more representation. So when they are doing delimitation of constituencies, once there's an increase in the population of those communities, the delimitation exercises for administrative purposes will be redone to meet the aspiration of those communities based on their population dynamics. Okay,
there have been some groups or some parts of the country have been advocating for more states, particularly in the eastern states, eastern region. They've been advocating for one more state to be created to equal with some other regions of the country. Now, after this is done, are we going to see more advocacy for creation of new local governments, creation of more states in certain regions with figures that will arrive from the census?
I think
would that justify the need for the creation of more local governments and even states?
Well, in terms of creation of more states, personally, I don't really believe in creation of more states. But for political balance, maybe the one state that is being requested from the eastern region, if that is done, then that will just okay to balance the political configuration. In other words, once there are increase in population, I know there's a delimitation that will call for political consideration in terms of constituencies and all that. But on the other hand, I don't think really that people should focus on state creation. What people should focus on is the revenue allocation that are derivable to various states. To what extent are these revenue used for development? I think the advocacy from communities should be the impact of the current revenue that comes to their various states and local government. To what extent do they impact positively on development and social amenities in those areas? I think that's key for me.
Now let's take a shift to the other arm of the discussion, which is the issue of public awareness and participation. Now, from your observation, you talked about the last census you participated as a core member. That could be some years ago. Now,
1991, precisely.
Oh, great, great. Now, talk to us. What's your observation as regards the level of participation, the level of awareness? And then do you think if government announces another census now, Nigerians or Africans will be willing to participate or see it as a necessity? Talk to us about the level of awareness. And
no, I think the awareness is there, but what is more important is that the national population and other stakeholders that are involved in population's data collection must find a way to push public awareness on the importance of data collection and the impact it has even on the deliverable that they expect from government. I think that's the way to go. That census is not just for political representation or just for revenue allocation, that you need those data for planning, even for private sector initiative that will help to create employment opportunity. So key, again, education. Even communities, traditional rulers must be involved in trying to create those advocacy and awareness for community to partake in enumeration.
Sorry, Sam, my question is, from your experience, to talk about the level of participation. You know, we've had reports of people on the day census is to be conducted, going to firms, for their own business, where reasons and their own personal engagement. So that's the area I would like you to address, the level of participation, what happens with the experience you've had in 1991, the level of participation.
Yeah, what I had, the experience in 1991 was very okay. The only challenge where I took part as an enumerator was religious issues, where people in the household, they just list the name of people in the household, particularly women. You're not able to count them as a man. I think that's the only challenge. So we need more education in that area. Beyond the cultural and religious imperative, I think the participation is okay. And with the level of technology and awareness on the importance of data, I'm sure that more participation will be gotten from citizens if we come to another full cycle of census.
Okay, still talking about participation. I talked about apathy a while ago, how some persons may just have the apathy to it and that they're not really concerned. Now, how do we come to a level where everybody is keen into the process and making themselves available where they should be and offering the right support? Because if you have enumerators go into the interiors, you would need people to guide them because some of them may be new to those areas. Now, how do we come to that level where it becomes a thing that people own, a process that people own and are willing to offer any form of support that is needed?
I think, again, I'm sorry that I'm using this word too often, key and central to this information gathering, particularly census, is a level of education and awareness. But in terms of apathy, I know government do normally declare holidays for national population counting. So if the holidays are declared, normally there are people who are enforced that people remain within their community so that they are counted. Beyond even the human element of census, you have even housing census. You know, the houses are equally counted as a basis of enumeration to know the level of population. It's even housing as an aspect. So people, traditional rulers, community heads, civil society organization, international NGO must be involved in the campaign that if you are counted, is more beneficial for the community when you present yourself for counting, because that will improve on in terms of allocation, in terms of health services, road network, rural electrification that will come into the community, because those data will help in driving public policy initiative.
How much of awareness do we have when it comes to the data, you know, being aggregated for census and using it in planning? How much has that translated to progress and development for Nigeria?
I think the various ministries and departments of government use data for planning. What is key and critical is to what extent, what is the quality of the data, how reliable are these data that have been collected, but they use data for planning, and data continually will be central to planning and national development. So the importance of census is key for national growth, national development, and even for national integration. If we know the number of people in certain region, then you're able to plan specifically that meet the aspirations and needs of those regions.
Now, for this to happen, for the enumeration to happen, ad hoc staffs will be recruited, and we've seen that the budget for the census that was supposed to happen this year is on the high side. Is there a possibility of having some form of volunteerism? And how will it enable the process in terms of credibility?
Volunteerism is key. To what extent the National Population Commission want to use volunteer is beyond the scope of our discussion here. But I think when people volunteer in terms of certain things, then the funding become easily manageable. But census generally, globally, they are a very expensive venture, but it's something that must be done. But Volunteers can be used. Civil society organization can lend credence in terms of creating baseline studies at a cheaper rate or even free through volunteerism efforts. Philanthropists as well, who don't have political colorations, can equally put some funding. And I do know that the National Population Commission equally have funding from development partner, multilateral agencies to support certain things towards enumeration.
How do we bring in religious leaders to correct this sentiment, religious sentiment? Because whether you like it or not, perhaps in the next election, it's still going to play out if something is not done. How do we tackle this, with the role of religious leaders, traditional leaders? Because the homegrown solution now, it's important. The solution, the level of participation has to be local.
I think the National Orientation Agency has a big responsibility in this respect. And I think they have offices in over 700 something local government across the country. To what extent do we use those staff in the local government to have a kind of collaboration, a partnership with community leaders, traditional leaders, religious leaders, so that they're able to talk to their subjects or their communities to participate in the enumeration. And what is important, they need to drum into them the importance of this enumeration, that this enumeration will enhance the level of schools that will be provided in the community, the level of health centers, the level of local roads that will be built in those communities, even the ability from their produce to get from the farm gate into the market are equally important when they are properly counted.
I like to always use the election as a comparison for the census, because these are tools for national development. In the case of election, you have election observers. Is it possible to have census observers towards ensuring transparency? And how would that come with public participation?
That's a good initiative. I think we can exploit that as a way of authenticating the viability and the reliability of those data, and to what extent would the collation officer adhere to the laid down procedure for the enumeration processes.
In cases or situations where you have political interference, who should tackle that? Because you have people in power, funding this commission, providing the resources. What role can citizens play? Because you're talking about public participation now. What role can they play to ensure that they also do their bit to reduce political interference?
I think it's citizen diplomacy, citizens engagement, and in addition to that, communities must own the process, that if they are being counted, is beyond political reasons, that it will benefit them. So we still go back to the earlier question of education. Education creates awareness, and once people are aware, they become more sensitive to certain issues, and that census is critical to development in the community, and it has a direct relationship with the infrastructure that they will enjoy from those communities. Once they have this kind of mindset, then the participation will improve over a period of time. But political interference is a subtle diplomacy. It's not something that is even in the open. So how people will manipulate some of those things. And when I talk about machine and artificial intelligence and IT, we'll be able to bring out certain double counting that people try to manipulate. So technology will enable it better, but we need to educate people even before the census take place, during and after.
Thank you very much, Sam Uruji, for being with us on the discussion. We've looked at political interference in ethnic settlement as it affects census, and we've also talked about awareness.